So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 of my hottest guitar-related takes. To back up everything that I say in this video, I'm a professional musician. I've toured nationally. I've been doing this thing for about 20 years. I've played a lot of guitars, a lot of amps, a lot of gigs. And these are just all my opinions. So if you disagree, let me know in the comments. I'm down to have a little banter if you feel so inclined. And also, if you have your own hot takes, I'd love to hear them. I can maybe do another video where I respond to your hot takes. But anyways, let's jump right in. We're starting from mild and then we're going hot as we continue to go down. But my first guitar-related hot take has to do with fretboard radiuses. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, every guitar has a fretboard radius. Well, hopefully every guitar has a fretboard, and that fretboard will have a radius, and that kind of refers to the curvature of the frets this way. Now, vintage style guitars often come with a bigger fretboard radius. What I mean by bigger is the number is actually smaller, and that means that there's more curve to it. Now, the thinking at the time when this came out was that if you had more curve, it would be more comfortable to play your cowboy chords, stuff like that. And then, as time went on, players have shifted to wider and wider, or flatter and flatter, I should say. Flatter and flatter fretboard radiuses. And that, in my opinion, is something that should be embraced. However, some of the big guitar companies, notably Fender themselves, the radius, to Fender's credit, the radius used to be 7.25 inches, I believe, and now it's 9.5. I still think that this is too high. I think it's too rounded. And again, the reason that this was originally put in place was so that it would be more comfortable to fret chords, which makes sense. We're looking for, comfort, we're looking for playability, we're looking for all of those things. But the benefits of having a flatter fingerboard radius allows you to have lower action without getting fret buzz. And I think that the benefit of having lower action, and therefore an easier time fretting, ends up being a more net positive gain than it would be having that wider radius. So my first hot take is that no fretboard radius should be smaller than 12 inches. I think 12 inches is a great starting point. Some people go lower. A lot of acoustic guitars have 16-inch radiuses. It's kind of interesting that we abandoned that when we got to the electric guitar. We made the radiuses a little bit bigger. But I think that fretboard radiuses should, as standard, be flatter. Tradition be damned. So there's my hot take number 1. My second hot take is that thin strings are overrated. Now, let me qualify this. I have no problem with people playing strings that they like. If you play 9s, if you play 8s, and you're happy with them, that is awesome. But recently, in the last 5 or so years, there's been a huge trend, I think mostly sparked by Rick Beato. And again, I have nothing against Rick Beato. But there's been a really big kick towards thinner and thinner guitar strings. There's a couple reasons that I dislike this. And again, it is personal preference. You can set up your guitar to play however you want to play the guitar. But oftentimes, I think people go to these thinner strings because of, these outside influences and stuff like that, rather than thinking about some of the actual benefits that you get with thicker strings. Now, I'm a bit of a rare case. I am primarily a jazz guitarist in my performing career. That's where I make the most of my money. It's my favorite music to play, and it's what I spend most of my time doing. That said, I do still do... I should have maybe actually been recording my live amp sound while I do that. But you get just raw acoustic electric guitar in this case. So with the thicker strings and being a jazz guitarist, I play 12s. And I play 12s on all of my guitars tuned to standard tuning. So there's a couple of reasons I like this. One, I think you get a little bit warmer and rounder of a clean sound. You can adjust your amp settings. You can adjust your touch on the instrument to do that. But I really like the kind of fuller sound. And then the other thing that I love is when I pick up my acoustic guitar, it's the same gauge strings as the electric. It doesn't feel like the acoustic is a ton more work to play than an electric. And I really like that. But the biggest thing, because I've tried this out. I've tried going down to 11s and I've tried going down to 10s. And I never am able to stick with it because I absolutely loathe what I need to do when I go to those thinner strings. Because the strings are thinner, there's less tension in them and they oscillate more, which means I have to raise my action higher to avoid fret buzz. So while it might be a little bit trickier to play on thicker strings, you can actually run a lower action because the string oscillates less when it's strummed. So that is the big reason why I can't go to thinner strings. And then the other thing with thick strings that is both a downside and a positive, depending on how you want to look at it, is that bending them is tougher because there's more tension on them. I find that actually helps me play more in tune. I don't overshoot my bends. Is this something that I can totally adjust to? Yes, probably. Is it something that I'm willing to spend the time to adjust to? No. So I think that, again, play whatever strings you like. I have nothing against you if you use thin strings, but I often see that, at least in the online guitar space of today, the benefits of using thin or thicker strings are often not talked about at all, and everyone's on the thin string train. So there are benefits to running thicker strings, and it's kind of like anything. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So I don't think that the benefits of thick strings are firmly talked about, and I, as a player, really don't like playing thin strings personally. So that's hot take number 2. My next hot take is that American guitars are overpriced and overrated. I'm not just saying that because I'm Canadian and all of the political climate of right now, but back in the day, there used to be a huge difference. Even when I was growing up playing the guitar, there was a pretty big difference between the stuff that Chinese companies put out, or, Fender Mexican guitars were not as good as Fender American guitars. I believe that with the advent of CNC machines and there being way more competition in the kind of beginner and mid-tier kind of priced guitar range, that people have really had to step up and improve the production of those. And I really don't think it's this kind of like old standard thing that's kind of been just pushed through, is that it needs to be an American guitar to be good enough. And I have to say that couldn't be further from the truth. Very often, I'm going to use Fender as an example. This is a Fender Player Telecaster. It's not the Player 2. It's the original line. This was made in Mexico. This Telecaster, I actually have preferred over American Telecasters that I've played, over custom shop Telecasters that I've played. It really doesn't matter where the guitar is made. What I will say is that it is the American-made guitars, they often have, the companies kind of impose this limit on their Mexican-made guitars, or on their Indonesian or Chinese or wherever it is guitars, where if you go American, you do get kind of better hardware right off the go. And if you really are in love, like something like an Ultra Telecaster, it would be really hard to get that set of components at a comparable price. So there are occasionally times to do it. But if you are just looking for a Telecaster, you don't want any bells and whistles, I would argue that this is just as good as the American Standard or the American Performer, or whatever Fender calls it now. It used to be very easy to kind of digest Fender's line. Now it isn't. Because all of these guitars are made on CNC machines, there's so much more kind of consistency in them. There's much less kind of deliberate man hours that go into it. The caveat that I will add to this is that because the American guitars are made by, the more experienced builders, there's more kind of cost and detail put into them. A lot of the time, I would say that the average American guitar is still maybe better than those. But if you find a Mexican guitar or a Mexican Fender like this that plays well, sets up well, and isn't too heavy, it's just as good as an American one. I'm really not convinced that in the year 2025, there are not better options available made elsewhere for better money. And the other thing with all of this, I will add, is that if you can live without Fender or Gibson or whatever other big brand being on the headstock, you can get way more value for money. And you can probably get about as good of a guitar for anywhere from half to 3/4 of the price. So, yeah, American guitars, overpriced, overrated. My next hot take, which I've shared on this channel before and I got quite a bit of pushback, but I still hold true in this belief. There's a lot of people who think that locking tuners improve tuning stability. I don't believe this to be true. At least I don't believe it to be true in a meaningful way. So for those who don't know, locking tuners are tuners where the string goes through and you turn a little knob and it physically pinches the string within the tuning pick. That, I believe, could maybe lead to like some 0.001% increase in tuning stability versus a conventional tuner. Would you actually notice that in the real world? I'm convinced not. The biggest thing that locking tuners do is if you ever break a string on stage or something, it can really speed up your string changes, because rather than wrapping and doing the winds and making sure that it doesn't slip, it's just locked in place. But outside of that, I don't think that they improve tuning stability in any meaningful way. I personally actually don't even like locking tuners. My favorite tuners are the old school Fender. You put it in the center, like down into the tuner shaft. Those are my favorite tuners, and I've never had tuning stability issues. With tuning stability, 99 times out of 100, I'd even say 100 times out of 100 actually, the problem is either in an ill-fitting nut that's binding the string, and then you bend, it puts tension on the string slips, and then it returns to not its original place. That's really common in the nut, and it can also sometimes happen on a worn-out bridge saddle, or a bridge saddle that has a groove put in it from something. So, hot take number 4, locking tuners do not meaningfully improve your tuning, despite what the companies that sell locking tuners may tell you. Again, if they make you feel nice, if you like them, if you like quicker string changes, if you like just having that in your core, you know that if you break a string on stage, you can get a new one in there in like 20 seconds. By all means, go for it, but I think they're often advertised as things that will improve your tuning stability when in actuality they don't do much at all for that particular purpose. Now, my final hot take, I told you I was saving the spiciest for last. This is that in 2025, real amps are overrated. Now, what I mean by this is that most guitarists will be perfectly served, and frankly better served, by having a digital modeler that can be had for way cheaper than a tube amp. If you look at things like the HX Stomp, Hot Tone Ampero Stomp, which is the one that I particularly use, Nano Cortex, all of these options, you have way more variety. You have just as good of a sound. I don't care if you think that you can magically hear the difference between a tube amp and a modeler in a recorded scenario. Any of that stuff comes down to luck, and if you believe that you can, I mean, God bless you, but you're probably a holdover who was alive when the original Line 6 pod came out, and those did not sound very good. The technology has come ridiculously far with captures, with NAMM captures, with modeling. They all sound great. And the great thing about having a modeler is that you can have a collection of really nice amps that you like, rather than just one that's really heavy, might break on you if it's a tube amp, and has all of these other things. Now, I am not against people having tube amps, and I am not wishing tube amps out of existence. I love tube amps. If money and space were no concern, I'd have a beautiful old Fender amp hiding in the corner. But money and space are a concern, and therefore, I do not have a tube amp sitting in the corner. I have a digital modeler. It weighs about 2 pounds, and I can bring my entire rig to my gigs in a gig bag. And I think that's incredible, and I wouldn't sacrifice it for the world. And then from a student perspective, especially when you're getting into these things, say you're an intermediate guitarist trying to level up your gear and get a little bit more serious, it is much easier to dip your toes into modeling than it is to buy a tube amp. Because if you buy a tube amp, you have one really good approximation of that sound, whereas if you buy a digital modeler and a speaker to play it through, or some studio monitors, whatever it is, you can sample a bunch of sounds. And then down the line, if you decide that you do want to get the tube amp because you have one that you just absolutely really, really love, you can buy that tube amp. So anyways, there's my 5 hot takes. Let me know what you think about them. Let me know if you have your own. Again, I'd love to make a follow-up video where I respond to yours. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It truly helps me out and small YouTube creators like myself more than you could know. If you're looking to take a guitar lesson with me, there's a link to get in touch with me down in the description. I'd love to work with you on whatever's troubling you on the guitar. If you're looking for a way to support me and what I do here on the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon as well down below. All of my patrons get early access to my videos, as well as cool behind-the-scenes sneak peeks that I don't really share anywhere else. So I'd love to see you over there. Another great way to support me and what I'm up to and score some awesome educational content for yourself is to check out my ebooks or my video courses, also linked down in the description or on the product shelf. It's a great way to get some educational content from me that's a lot more in-depth than I can go into in a 10 to 15 minute YouTube video. Last but not least, I gotta wish you a wonderful day, and I hope you have some fun playing the guitar. So let me know what you think of these hot takes. Let me know if you have any of your own. And yeah, play some guitar.